Hello, everyone, and welcome to the January 2023 consulting webinar provided by CDI. Today's webinar is Simplify Your Scanning Processes by Automating. My name is Michael Mathis. I am the Client Services Director at CDI, and I will be your host for today's webinar, where we are going to simplify scanning process. If you have questions at any time during today's webinar, please post those in the questions box at any time. We will have time available at the end of today's webinar for any additional questions that do come up. If you need any immediate assistance, please raise your hand and we will unmute you and answer any immediate questions or concerns there may be. Some tips for success for today's webinar. Be sure to take notes and screenshots. I find it's very helpful to include the time or how far into the webinar we are so that you can easily find that section again when you go back to view on YouTube. Don't be afraid to ask questions. We definitely love all questions that do come up, and we will have time available at the end of today's webinar for questions. Please complete the survey after the webinar today. We do love hearing your feedback and all of your ideas for future webinars. And remember that this webinar will be recorded and available on our CDI YouTube channel within a few days after the webinar. The intended audience for today's webinar is Laserfiche end users and Laserfiche administrators. All of the content in today's webinar is applicable to Laserfiche Cloud, Laserfiche Web Client, and the Laserfiche Desktop Client. During today's webinar, we are going to learn how to automatically name and dynamically folder documents, configure advanced image processing, such as auto rotation, blank page removal, and more. We will automatically break documents apart when scanning in batch mode. And we will learn how to use shortcut keys to optimize our efficiency within Laserfiche Scanning. The first item is automatically naming and dynamically foldering our documents as they are scanned. We can accomplish this by using the default properties on the left side of the scanning window and configuring all of our information in the default properties pane on the right. In our default properties pane, we are able to specify our default document name, the template and field information, as well as the folder path, number of pages per document, which volume to store our documents into, and automatically signing documents upon scanning. In any of the inputs that allow for tokens, both tokens and or static text can be used to fill in the information. So in our document name, for example, you can see we are using 3 different tokens from our field information, along with the space hyphen space delimiter between our field values. We can specify the default configuration for these values by using the options dialog within Laserfiche Scanning. And by using the default settings here, this will configure what our default settings are upon loading of Laserfiche Scanning. That way we won't need to reconfigure everything every time we open scanning. Within the options, we have various settings that are mostly the same between the different options here. So for the document name, for example, we can use our auto name settings from the Laserfiche client. We can use the last scanned document name. We can force our user to input a new name, or we can use a custom document name. And we will review the other properties available during the live demonstration portion of today's webinar. Laserfiche Scanning provides a number of built-in advanced image processing features that are available to use with scanning while you are scanning in your images. So for example, we can remove empty pages. We can automatically rotate document pages. We can deskew and despeckle those pages, and many more. If we are scanning in a batch of documents, Laserfiche Scanning also allows us to separate those documents based on a specific number of pages per document. So for example, if we're scanning in a stack of one-page documents, we can limit our pages per document to one page, and Laserfiche will then split that document apart, or all of those pages, into individual one-page documents. And finally, we will look into using shortcut keys for efficiency. Shortcut keys allow you to press a specific hotkey combination on your keyboard to perform any action without needing to move your hand to the mouse. I love hotkeys and use them all the time. It really saves a lot of time as opposed to having to go back and forth to the mouse to go between documents or between pages of the documents. And at this point, we will move into our live demonstration and configuration of Laserfiche Scanning. I have my Laserfiche Cloud repository opened in the Laserfiche web client. And I am in my incoming scans folder because that is where we scan our documents into by default. In the top right corner, we have the scan icon that we can click to scan documents into a folder. Or if we select an existing document, we can scan additional pages into our existing document. Today I'm going to be scanning new documents into this folder, and I am going to click the scan button to open Laserfiche Scanning. By default, Laserfiche is going to ask you to select your scanning mode. In the web client, there are 3 options available. In the desktop client, we would only have desktop scanning basic and desktop scanning standard. With the Laserfiche web client, we can use a streamlined interface for scanning multiple documents in the browser. For today's demonstration, we will be using the Laserfiche desktop standard scanning. And this is the recommended option to use when using Laserfiche Scanning. If you don't have Laserfiche Scanning installed already, or if there is a newer version available, Laserfiche will display the download and install desktop scanning button, which will download the installer for Laserfiche Scanning and allow you to install that newer version. You can also check the Don't Ask Me Again box to not be displayed this dialog again, and Laserfiche will default to whatever you have selected. When I click OK, that is going to open our Laserfiche scanning window. And this has all of our presets configured for us. And at this point, we don't have any because we are brand new with Laserfiche Scanning. So at this point, we can start scanning and see how our basic functionality looks. And oh boy, Nope, not good. We have blank pages, we have lines. Oh, that one's upside down, jeepers. So in our revision pane, we can select either the document or the folder and delete all of these. At this point, I'm going to go back to our default properties. And here we can specify defaults for just this document batch that we're scanning in. Or if we use our File menu and open the Options dialog, under Scanned Document, we get access to our document name, template, volume, and auto-sign options that are going to be the default every time that we open up Laserfiche Scanning. So for my document name, I'm using the Laserfiche client auto name settings. I want to change that to custom. And we can change this to new document. We don't have a lot of extra functionality in this document name here as far as the ability to use tokens. So what I like to do is use my last scanned document name as my default document name. All of our documents, we are going to be assigning the documents template. That is the default template that we're going to be using for 98% of our documents, and if any others do come up, we can change those at the time of scanning. In Laserfiche Cloud, we only have one volume. With self-hosted environments, you can configure multiple Laserfiche volumes, and you can choose which volume to import the scanned documents into. And we can also use our client import settings or not auto-sign our documents or remember from our last scan session. I'm going to select OK to save our defaults. And it didn't change our templates because we will need to close and reopen Laserfiche Scanning for those new defaults to come into effect. Now you can see that we have our documents template assigned by default. I'm going to update my default document name, and from the token menu, I am going to use fields. This is going to be our client name, space, hyphen, space. We are going to assign our field document type, space, hyphen, space, and fields document date. So by using these template field tokens, I am able to automatically have my documents named with whatever information is in our template fields, as opposed to needing to populate each of these individually. If we go over to our image processing, here we are able to add in a number of imaging enhancements, as well as other image processes that we can use during scanning. So for example, we saw one of our pages was completely upside down. We can add in our rotate image process, and this will bring up the rotate wizard. So here for our page range, we are going to specify all pages. Next, we can specify our image rotation. So we can automatically rotate our image, which is what we want to do in this case, where Laserfiche Scanning will automatically detect what orientation the image should be. Otherwise, we can specify a certain number of degrees to rotate our image by. 90, 180, or 270 degrees clockwise. Here we'll leave this at automatically and select finish to finish our wizard. At the bottom of every Laserfiche process, there is a test process option. And this is fantastic. It is one of my favorite features. If we right-click on image processing, we can either import or scan a sample image to use to test our processes. So here I'm going to import my rotated image. We will test our process, and as soon as we click that, we see our image is the right way up. If we wanted to rotate every image by 90 degrees, we can change that, test our process again, and our image is rotated by 90 degrees. Switch this back to automatically, test our process again, and it looks excellent. We will continue adding processes. So next we can add in our despeckle option to remove any speckles that we may have on our image. So we can process our specific set of pages or all pages. Next, we will set our speckle size. And this will allow us to determine how big that speckle must be in order for it to be removed. We can specify small, medium, or large, or specify a specific size. If you set your speckle removal size to large, it may recognize periods as speckles and remove those from your image, or the dot above your eye, or below your eye if your image is rotated. Here we'll set this to large. We can protect characters from being removed as well by checking this box. This prevents images for being mistaken for noise. Or I'm sorry, prevents characters from being mistaken for noise and removed. If we finish, we can test our process again. And it looks like we have some periods that were removed by specifying large. If we change this back to small, test our process again, and there we can see that we have all of our periods back in our sentences. Again, if we change this to large and test, we can see that a couple periods here got removed. And by testing your process with scanned images is going to help you really optimize what size these speckles should be. Typically, small is going to be the best option in order to not remove your periods or other dots that are supposed to be in your document, but that can always be adjusted and tested as needed. Next, we can add in our deskew option, and this is going to make sure that our pages are not slightly off, slightly crooked. So every once in a while, your scanner will pull in a page a little bit crooked, and we can use our deskew to automatically deskew those documents. We have different options for deskew. We can deskew by lines, text, or angle. And again, this is just going to help Laserfiche Scanning identify how to best handle these images. So let's change our sample image to my skewed image here. On this page, you can see we have a lot of text. We have some lines, and this could help with the deskewing. Typically, angle is going to be a good option to use, and we can always test our process to make sure that it runs correctly. This still looks a little bit off to me. It looks like it de-skewed a little too much. Now we're skewed the other way. If we change to text and test our process again, that looks better. Let's try lines and see if that gives us even better results. Not quite. I think I like text the best. So depending on whether your scanned documents mostly have text or if a lot of them have lines, that's going to help you determine which skew detection method to use. And like I said, typically angle is going to be your best option if you're scanning in kind of a combination of everything. Finally, we can add in our line removal option, and this is going to remove any lines that we may have in our image that we do not want. So if there is a speck of dust in our scanner, or if highly unfortunately we have a scratch in our scanner glass, that's going to leave a long line down your scanned documents, and we can use line removal to help clean those up. So we'll accept the default of all pages on the first tab of our wizard. Next, we can specify the orientation of our lines, and here I'm going to want to remove our vertical lines. Next, we can specify the line size, and this is going to determine how many pixels long that line must be before it can be removed. If you know it's going to be a very long line because it's a scratch in the glass, we can set this to long. We can set it to short if we want to remove just our little short lines around pictures to help clean up the OCR results here. Typically, I stay with the default of medium. Next, we can specify our line thickness. So we can, if it's a thin line, medium line, a thick line, how wide is that line? How wide does it need to be before we remove it? We have a line gap to specify the minimum gap between two line segments in pixels. We can remove excess lines, so if there are any additional lines that maybe we have a line with a couple pixel break in that line and then more of the line, this excess line cleanup will identify that additional line portion. And finally, we can set our character reconstruction option. This one is a pretty fun option, and it will reconstruct the characters if a line is running through it. So if we had a line through the F in files, using character reconstruction, this will add in the little part of the letter F that was removed. So here we can set this to low, which will be our fastest, and select finish. And I'm going to once again change our sample image to my lines sample. So here you can see we have our long vertical line through the whole document. We have a lot of lines around our tables, our subtotals. There's just lines everywhere in our invoice. If we test our process here, we can see that our line removal removed those long lines, and it also removed all of our other vertical lines that we really wanted to keep. We want to keep those lines between our columns and our tables here. So if we change our line thickness to thin, let's test our process again. and we still don't have those. So let's specify a size as 3. We'll go with 2 and test our process again. And there we have our vertical lines back that we want. And we still don't have those vertical lines from the scratch in our glass that we did not want. I'm going to turn off the character reconstruction option and run our test again. And we can see here we have part of our N cut off, we have part of our S cut off, we have part of our E and miscellaneous cut off. If we turn this back on, even with low, our fastest option, and test this again, we can see it filled in some of those lines. Our letters look a little bit better. If we change this to aggressive, which will take much longer, it will include some more of those partial characters that this E here is a good example as well. If we set this to low and test, or none and test, it's going to leave gaps in our E. Most of the time, if we do need this turned on, low seems to be a good choice. If you do see more weirdness, you can always move it up to moderate or aggressive at that time. However, it is going to take longer for processing. Finally, we are going to add in our page removal process. With our page removal, this gives us the option to remove either a specific page of every document that we scan. So if we're scanning in pages with a cover sheet and we don't want to include that cover sheet, we can remove that first page. Otherwise, we can remove images whose file size is less than a certain number of bytes. This is going to be very helpful for removing those blank pages. So if we have just an empty page with nothing on it, this is going to catch that one and remove it for us. We can also add in our OmniPage OCR process, and this will then OCR our documents as they come in, or as we are scanning them. One reason not to add this process in is OCR does take a while to process. If we do add this in, we have all of our options for OCR, such as selecting the language, decolumnizing, our optimization style of speed, standard, or accuracy. We have an auto rotate option here. And the auto rotate option within our OmniPage OCR process is a temporary rotation. If a page is scanned in upside down and we do not have our rotate process, but we do check auto rotate, our document page is still going to be upside down when it's stored. However, when it is OCR'd, the OCR engine is going to rotate the document to get the best text, but that rotation is not going to be saved. That is the biggest gotcha that I've run into with that auto rotate is, why is it still upside down? Because it's a separate process. All right, so I am going to delete our OCR process for the sake of speed during our scanning here. If we delete that and start our scan again, we see here that we have our documents being pulled in. And again, we have all of our documents in one page, or all of our pages in one document. Our image or our line removal did work. It looks like our deskew and other processes are working correctly. So let's go back to our default properties. And that's why I forgot to limit to one page per document. If we were to split this document one by one, we can right-click, delete our page, and say yes. We can right-click, create document, and this will create a new document from our page. So here we have that one page in our new document. We can go back to our original document, right-click, create document. That's a lot of clicking, and it takes a lot of time. What I like to do is customize my keyboard. And here we can select our action, or our category rather, so action, edit, file, navigation. If we go to our page menu, we have our split document here, action. So here I can call this Control-Alt-D. So I just press the Control and the Alt button on my keyboard and the D key. So press the hotkey that you want to use on your keyboard and we can select Assign. There are some hotkeys that are pre-configured, such as rotate right, rotate left. If we look in our image menu, sometimes the hardest thing is, split document is Control-D. Split document here, Control-Alt-D. Create document is Control-N. So if I close out of my keyboard, I can Control-N and yes. If I want to now have a hotkey that moves up, and I believe there's already one configured. Previous document is Alt plus left. So if I press Alt plus the left arrow key on my keyboard or the right arrow key, I can go back to my other documents. We can select this page and I'll Control-Shift-D. Nope, it was Control-Alt-D to split my document from there. So if I go back to my first document, this has the 3 pages from before my selection. If I go to the last, this is going to have the remainder of my pages. That's still a lot of work, so we can delete these documents. And since I have my default properties set with 1 page per document, I am going to scan my images again. And now we can see as those come in, we have 1 page per document. If I use my Alt left arrow, Alt right arrow, I can look through these pages, look through these documents to review, and make sure everything looks fantastic. And so far, so good. We can configure our default path to no longer be incoming scans. So again, I will delete these. Automating takes a long time to set up, but once we have this done, it will be wonderful. Here we can say our default folder path is going to be, we'll call this webinar client files. We will name this folder then with that menu opens up on my other monitor. So this is then going to go under our client name folder, and we will have a subfolder for the document type. We have this limited to 1 page per document. And at this point, we have our document date set as our date token. So this is going to fill in today's current date. In a date field, we also have a keyboard shortcut of pressing the spacebar to fill in today's date automatically. If this were a date time field, that would fill in with the current date and time. We're going to say all of these that we're scanning in are purchase orders. And we will pre-fill our client name with Jane Smith. Now when we start scanning, oops, I forgot to put my pages in. If you start scanning and get no pages, my issue there is usually I forget to put my paper in the scanner. And now that we have all of our documents scanned in again, our page removal seems to not be working quite right. Let's set this to Let's set this to 6,000 bytes, and we can try this one more time. We'll delete all of our documents and oops, put my pages back in the scanner and start scanning again. Our blank page still came in, and this is because the scanning is set to separate individual documents, so it's going to keep this blank page in here as long as we have that option set there still. So if we go into our individual documents, we can look at our settings, and we have our volume. Under fields, we can see all of our template fields that are populated. Our document name still has our tokens in it, however, as does our folder path. These tokens are not going to be resolved until this document is stored to the repository. That way, if we decide this one is an invoice instead of a purchase order, we are able to have that take effect before storing that document. So again, here, if this is for John Smith instead of Jane Smith, we will change our client name, and nothing happened because we are going to be using that token. If we notice this document needs to move to a completely different folder, we can move this to a different folder automatically right inside of scanning. And we'll call this webinar client files for review. And here we can see that when we set that path without any tokens, or it's a different path, our documents move automatically. We can then drag and drop our documents into our different folders to move them to where we actually want them to go prior to storing them into the repository, where they may be in multiple folders, multiple locations, and it would be more difficult to find all of those files. Once we are done with scanning and all of our pages look clean and processed using all of our image processing, we can then store all of our documents to our Laserfiche repository. Since I'm using cloud, this is going to ask me to log in. So I'm going to enter my account ID. I'm going to enter my username and my password. Sign in, and this will then store our documents to our Laserfiche repository. Okay, let's try storing one more time here. We have our store immediately option. This is another good option to know about. With store immediately, our documents are going to be immediately stored to our repository as we scan. And we won't need to manually store our files either one by one or using the store all documents. I don't know why I'm getting these pop-ups in the middle of a live webinar, other than it's a live webinar. Let's try. I'm going to pull up my Laserfiche repository again. We'll go back to incoming scans and open scanning. Again, we're using basic scanning. And since we closed out of Laserfiche scanning before storing all of our documents, those are still going to be available inside of Laserfiche scanning once it reopens. There we go. So we have documents from our previous session have been found. Would you like to load these documents? I'm going to say yes, because I still want those documents to be stored. So here I can store all of my documents. And there it goes, sending my pages. Okay, now that our documents are stored, we can close out of scanning. And if we go back to the root of our repository, we have our webinar client files folder, along with Jane Smith, our invoice folder with our one invoice, as well as our purchase order folder with all of our purchase orders. At this point, that concludes our live demonstration of Laserfiche scanning. If there are any questions in the future, we have many resources available, such as Laserfiche Answers, the Laserfiche Solutions Exchange, Laserfiche Support, and the CDI YouTube channel. You can also feel free to contact us at any time at consulting, sales, or support at citiesdigital.com. Thank you for attending today's webinar. My name is Michael Mathis, the Client Services Director at CDI, and at this time we will open up everything for questions. I do see that we have some questions in the questions box already, so I will start getting to those as well. If we do have additional questions that cannot be answered during our webinar, we will reach out to you with an answer on those. So we have a question regarding import agent. Can the default settings also be applied in import agent? Most of these settings for import agent are going to be specific to import agent. Some of them may carry through, but most settings in import agent are specific. We have a question, is there a way to change the default settings later? Yes, the default settings can always be changed at any time. And Laserfiche administrators also have the ability to copy the Laserfiche user attributes between multiple users to copy those defaults to different users. With Laserfiche scanning, we have a question, will we need to purchase desktop scanners? Yes and no. Typically, Laserfiche scanning is going to be used with a desktop scanner. However, in my demonstration today, I used Laserfiche Universal Capture, which allows me to pull in images from a Windows folder rather than from an actual desktop scanner. We have a question of, is there a way to run cleanup processes on documents that are already scanned without needing to scan them again? So if we go into Laserfiche scanning, I am going to bring back we'll bring back speckles. If I can find it. Here's my skewed image. So we'll scan in our skewed image. We don't have a way of reprocessing those files once they are scanned, unfortunately. So we would need to rescan those images after they are already scanned to apply cleanups. We have a question on how can you remove or extract a page from a completed or saved file. So after our documents are saved into the repository, we can open up that document in our web client or desktop client, and this will allow us then to delete the image if we no longer want that one. We can also rotate our images or annotate any of the other options available through the desktop client. We have a question on, can we import PDF files using Laserfiche scanning? We are not able to process PDF files. We are only able to process BMP, JPEG, and TIFF files. I do have a few answers to fill in the questions box. If there are any other questions, please feel free to post those now. I don't see many new questions coming in. If you do have any questions, please feel free to either raise your hand or post those in the questions area. We will stay on for just another few minutes here for any additional questions. All right, I don't believe there are any additional questions. If you do have any questions, you can definitely feel free to check out any of the resources listed on the screen here, or you can reach out to CDI directly at consulting, sales, or support at citiesdigital.com. Thank you everyone for taking the time out of your day today to attend the webinar, and enjoy the rest of your day.